Well, hello everyone. My name's Danny Parmalee, and I oversee church planting for Converge Mid-America, Southeast, and Caribbean. And today we're going to be looking at raising financial support. And this is actually a subject that I've become passionate about. You might not hear of a lot of people saying I'm passionate about raising financial support. But the reason I am goes a little bit back to my story. I came to Christ in college, and I was involved with Campus Crusade for Christ, and had to raise financial support to go on my first missions trips in college. Got a little bit of taste of support raising there, and then planted a church in 2004 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And of course, as part of that was raising support, which was different than raising just a couple $1,000s for a missions trip, but having to raise a significant amount of money. And kind of because of my past experience and a lot of my friends who raised financial support full-time for their living, I got a lot of great pointers, and became passionate about this process of raising support. So this is what we're going to cover here today. We're going to look at the understanding of why we raise support. We're going to look at some of the fears and attitudes, some of the assumptions that prevent us from successful support raising. You'll hear me often say that the biggest obstacle is usually ourselves in raising financial support. Then we're going to talk about the specific strategy of how you can raise 100% of your support package. And so that'll get into the very practical, pragmatic steps, the process, the system that we have for that. And then ultimately, just to learn how to do your part, but also how this is really a spiritual endeavor in which you're trusting God to provide. So we'll start out for the whys of raising support. We're going to talk about the biblical precedent. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because you can look up some of these passages. But I share these for two reasons. One is that you may get in conversations with people and they're going to wonder, is this even biblical what you're doing? But as I mentioned before, sometimes even for yourself, you may be questioning, you're in the middle of the process, like, is this even right? Should I be doing this? And I'd argue, yes, there's a biblical precedent for it. And there's a couple different passages. First of all, even going all the way back to Numbers chapter 18, verse 8, it says, "Then the Lord said to Aaron, I myself have put you in charge of the offerings presented to me. All the holy offerings to the Israelites give to me, and I will give to you and your sons as a portion and your regular share." So you see that the Levites were given a share, and that's how they essentially kind of earn their living. And in verse 21, it says, "I give to the Israelites all the tithes of Israel as their inheritance in return for the work that they do while serving at the tent of meeting." But probably my favorite one is actually Luke chapter 8, verses 1 through 3, where it talks about Jesus. He's traveling from village to village, and in verse 3, he says, "These women were helping to support them out of their own means." And so, a little bit of a Jesus juke here. If anybody ever asks you and says, is support raising biblical? You can say, well, if Jesus did it, I can do it too. So that's kind of one of those that I think is worth putting in the memory bank as you're kind of going through this process. And then finally, one from the New Testament that I really, really like is in Acts chapter 18, verses 4 through 5. It said, "Paul went to see them, and because he was a tent maker as they were, he stayed and worked with them. And every Sabbath he reasoned in the synagogue, trying to persuade the Jews and the Greeks." Now here's the key verse right here, so listen to this. "When Silas and Timothy came from Macedonia, Paul devoted himself exclusively to preaching." So just a small little discussion item here as far as bivocational ministry or co-vocational, as some people talk about it. I think that there is a place for that. There's opportunity as long as it really complements the mission. So we have an example here where there was a time in which Paul, being a tent maker, him having a full-time secular job, if you will, allowed him to be able to preach in the synagogues on the weekend. Now, the reason why this is important is that some of you may be thinking of going down that path, and that's okay. That's something you really need to discern and to pray about. But also you might have people asking you, well, why are you asking me for money? Why don't you just get a job at Starbucks or Home Depot or something else? We see, though, that there is a shift here where the Apostle Paul goes from a bivocational pastor to full-time, preaching. It says devoting himself exclusively to preaching and teaching. And so I would make an argument that if it is possible, to raise your full financial support so that you have freedom to be able to minister all the time and not have to have a job there. Now, again, like I said, some of that you have to discern. For some people, there's actually an advantage. You're in the community. You need that job, more than just, it's not about the money. It's about the connections that you make that way. But for a majority of you, being able to raise that full time. So those are just a few different ones of kind of the biblical precedent. Like I said, there's a whole bunch more that you can read on that. So the other thing is just talking about attitudes and assumptions, which I alluded to this kind of in the introduction, that oftentimes the biggest obstacle that we face is actually ourselves. So I would say every missionary, church planter, parachurch staff member that has to raise support, you're going to deal with certain attitudes and assumptions. We all have them. But by identifying these and mentally even correcting them or giving them over to the Lord in prayer, will be much more effective in raising ministry partners. So the positive and correct attitudes and assumptions that we hold, remind ourselves of those, and the ones that are not so right, we just need to correct those. So for some of you, like just the thought of even borrowing money from someone, or the thought that it's that ministry isn't really a worthy job, and that may just sound crazy, but I promise you, as you go through this process, you're going to have different emotions and different assumptions that will creep in, and so to always just kind of be paying attention to those things. So let's talk a little bit about the practical side of raising financial support. And there's different ways to kind of do this, and what I would say is that this is really the Cliff Notes version to a system and a process that you can read about in a book called God Ask, written by Steve Shadrach. I would say that even after listening to this presentation, absolutely buy that book, or there's an audio version, read it cover to cover, listen to it from start to finish, like 2 to 3 times so that it all sinks in. And what you'll learn in that is kind of what we're going over today, which is raising support for your salary. And so when I ask church planters to consider raising support, I ask them the question, are you willing to trust God to raise over $300,000? So usually when I say that, it's like, there's this look, or their eyes glaze over and they're like, $300,000? I could never do that. I don't know any rich people. I mean, it just seems like such a huge amount of money. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down for you kind of the system and how we do that, and how our church planners that follow this process and follow this system have found success and have raised well over that amount of money. So just kind of keep that in the back of your head. Raising $300,000. Don't shut this off. Listen to it through, because some of it may actually be a little bit easier than you had thought. So your step number 1 in all of this is to gather a group of prayer warriors. I know you're thinking, oh gosh, here we go. Like, no, I want to know really, how should we do this? No, I am being serious. Get a group of prayer warriors. This is not just the people on the list who you say, hey, will you give me financial support or join my prayer team? And then they say, I'm going to join the prayer team. I'm talking about a smaller group of people that you can communicate with on a regular basis. So this could be even a grandmother who just cares and loves you so much that you're able to say, hey, here's kind of where I'm at. Here's who I'm meeting with. Here's some of my specific needs. And just those people, there's got to be some people in your life that you know are just prayer warriors, and that you're going to communicate with them on a different level than you would with everyone else. And so gather that group. I think usually having 5 to 10 is kind of that ideal number of people that are specifically going to be praying for you during that time. The second step is called the name storm. So it is said that the average person can write down 400 names. Sounds like a lot, but I promise you can do it. I've had so many people say that is impossible. So I'm asking you, and maybe this is even one of the assignments, or maybe you even pause right here to be able to do it, or you set some time aside, even an hour If you're, if you're married, sit down with your spouse and write down 400 names. Now, here's the key. I didn't say write down 400 names of people that you think will support you. I just said write down 400 names of people that you have a relationship with. And just like brainstorming, NameStorm, helps you to think of more names than just kind of first come to mind. So you might write down your dentist. Maybe your dentist is even an atheist. That's fine. But then you remember, oh yeah, that's right. But also, the receptionist there. And that helps you remember someone else. Write down people that you went to high school with or college with, other ministries that you were involved with, relatives. Just do everything you can to just generate names and don't stop. Just keep going, keep writing down those names or typing them into a database until you at least hit 400. Many people can go well beyond that. So step number 1 is getting that prayer team. Step number 2 is just generating this huge, massive number of names. Step number 3 is where you're actually going to write a letter. Now, I have to kind of caution you here a little bit because some people think that this is the same as when you write a letter, when you're, going on a mission trip. It is not that. Okay, so we're going to be talking about a different type of letter. But what you're going to do first is you're going to take those 400 names that you have and you're going to have kind of a priority list. So you're going to start to arrange them. And I think that by really starting with about 25 to maybe 35 of your top prospects, and your top prospects are usually people that are closest to you and believe in you. Second would be people that believe in your mission. And then third would be people of actual means. And you're going to have some people on your list that are all 3 of these. Okay, so let's talk about maybe potentially mom and dad. Like they believe in you. They would support you no matter what you did. They're also, we'll say in this example, if they're believers and they believe in church planting and reaching people for Christ. And let's say your parents actually have the ability to give you some money. So that would be an example. But you're going to have some in that. Maybe it's someone who believes in the mission. It's someone that you knew and cares about church planting and evangelism and starting new churches. And they're a person of means. Okay, they're on the top of the list. Or it's someone who just number 1, they just care about you. Your uncle doesn't have any money, isn't a Christian, but just believes in you. They could be on that top of that list. So you'll start with those 25 to 30, and you're going to write their names and address down on a physical 3x5 card. Now, I know that we are in the age of technology, and you're thinking, oh, this is going to be simple. I'm just going to do it all on an Excel sheet. Okay, maybe, but I want to make just a small argument of the power of just writing it down on a piece of paper, because this is what you're going to use for kind of your tracking system. You'll flip, on the one side, name, address, phone number, whatever, maybe they're, if they're on social media. On the flip side, you're going to write, this is the date that you sent the letter, and then we're going to talk about the different follow-up process. So you write those down, and here's the deal with your letter. Your letter is 1 page, only 1 page, one-sided, no more than that. Lots of white space. You're not asking for financial support. You're not giving them away a way that they can actually support you. Do not put a giving link in there. Do not put an envelope. Your letter has one purpose and only one purpose. I'm planting a church, and I am going to give you a phone call so that we can set up a time to meet together. Okay, so this is hard for church planters to hear and to listen to, but that is the only purpose. You do not want them to give, because if you mail out those letters and you put a giving link in there, you are going to get a check back for $100 or $75, which you might be delighted with, but that is not actually what you want. What you want is an opportunity to actually sit down and to meet with them and explain your vision. The other thing that I find church planners, when they're writing this letter, they go through this whole narrative of how they're leaving their current job and God has led them on this place, and just going on and on and on about their whole thing. You literally just want a couple paragraphs saying, hey, hope you're doing well. We've had a lot of exciting things. We're going to be planting a church, and we're going to be asking people to financially support. So it's not a bait and switch when you call them. They know why you're probably sending the letter anyways. You're asking for people to maybe consider coming with, so you can allude to those things. But the important thing is that your final line that's in bold, that's underlined, that says, I am going to be calling you in the next 7 to 10 days to give you more detail. So right now, usually when I'm giving this sort of training, everyone's raising their hand like, hey, should we text? Can we send email? Should we, do all these different things? I think that your best bet is to start with a physical letter. There is just something to it where you're taking a little bit more time, a little bit more money. If you can put a recent family picture as part of that letter. It's also helpful. Also, it's less likely to get thrown directly into the trash. Just if you get a support letter and it's blank, the spouse might get it and throw it in the trash. The other person never sees it. But if your picture's on, a lot of times it gets put up in the fridge. Type of thing. And you want to start really with that letter and not use some of the other passive and easy ways, which is social media blasting people, and doing like some sort of mass email. Whatever you do, don't start by doing some sort of GoFundMe page. I've had a number of planters, they're just convinced this is the way to go. I have still yet to meet a single church planter that has used a GoFundMe page or social media to actually successfully raise their financial support. So I know we're talking old school here. Start with this process. We'll divert from it a little bit later on. Start with the letter. Tell them that you will call them. That'll bring us to step number 4, which I think is actually the most difficult part of this entire process, and that is making that phone call. So you said in the letter that you would call them in 7 to 10 days. So then you need to follow up with that. And that's why you're not going to send out 400 letters, because you'd never be able to really follow up with all those promises. And don't expect that people are just going to call you. So start with that. Those first 25 to 30 people, call them and say, blah, 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 a little bit of small talk. And I really do mean small talk. Don't just, talk forever about other things. They know why you're calling. And then you can transition and say, well, I'm following up on the letter that I sent out last week, and I'm wondering if you've had some time to hear more about my ministry. Here's a key. When you ask that question, stop. You might even need to remind yourself, because remember before when we talked about fears and attitudes and assumptions, we are just so programmed to just expect rejection that oftentimes we make excuses for people. It usually goes something like this. Well, I'm following up on that letter last week, and I'm wondering if you have some time to hear about my ministry. But I know that you're really, really busy with things, and so I hope you have a good day. Okay, so maybe that's an exaggeration, but oftentimes that's what we do. So just ask the question and let them respond. Do you have some time to hear more about my ministry? Now, depending on what they say, hopefully some of them will say, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. The best thing to do is for you to meet at their house for a couple of different reasons. They don't need to get directions. It's harder for them to cancel, honestly. If someone's coming to your house, things come up, but it's harder for them to call and say, hey, I don't want you to come over to my house anymore. It works easier to be able to do that. So your ideal thing is to meet them at their house, or if you meet them at their work, maybe as the number 2 spot, or maybe at a coffee shop or something like that. But the ultimate is to be able to meet them at their house. I also suggest that you don't do it over dinner. And it seems like a very natural thing, but you're better off scheduling it maybe just for drinks and dessert, because that creates an environment where you're sitting down, maybe couches, chairs. Whereas if it's in dinner, someone's getting up from the table, they're serving this, and then they're like, hey, we want to hear about your stuff, and you're trying to eat, but you're holding up your little brochure, which we'll talk about here in a moment. So the ideal, again, is to be able to maybe meet for a dessert in the evening would be absolutely great. If you can bring your spouse with you, if you can bring your family, that's great as well too. The time that you spend there, I think 30 minutes, 45 minutes, obviously depending on the relationship, but it's okay to meet there for 30 minutes. And I said again that phone is difficult because you that's the point where you're really even getting some sort of maybe that first rejection potential, if you will, and that becomes oftentimes one of the biggest challenges or obstacles, like I said, is for ourselves. I remember specific times where I didn't want to make the phone calls, and my wife was like, just go back in there and finish the calls, and you're just being faithful and obedient to what God has called you to. You can't make people have appointments with you. You can't force people to support you, but you can be faithful and obedient to really inviting them to be part of your mission and ministry. I'll say this one little thing though. I am never pushy for people to give money, but I do think it's okay to be a little bit pushy to have the meeting. And here's what I mean by this. Some of them are reluctant to have a meeting with you because they've actually had a bad experience in the past with someone raising financial support, or from a marketing person that's going door to door, or a multi-level marketing type of person. But you're not going to do that, and that's not part of our process. And that's why I think, like I said, where I've become passionate about raising financial support is that all you're really going to be doing is casting vision, and you're going to allow God to be the one working in people's hearts. So it relieves so much stress, so much pressure that you have to do this perfectly. Yeah, there's maybe some tips here and there of communication and the process that we're giving you. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you're being faithful and obedient to, I'm going to send letters out. I'm going to call them and see if they're willing to hear more information. And then if they say yes, I'm going to meet with them at their house. So again, the objective of the letter is literally to get a face-to-face appointment. That is what you want to do. I get it now. Maybe you can do it over Zoom. Efficiency isn't always the best though. So I would say anything you can do to make it face-to-face. I get that sometimes they'll need to be phone calls and those types of things. So our next thing is then what do you do once you actually have that call or have that appointment with them? And what we've found is that putting together an 8-page square booklet, and some of these we'll pop this up on the screen so that you can see this. And on the front, you'll just maybe have some logos, some graphics, some kind of visual things. The second part of it, you're going to kind of show the problem that the place that you're going faces. Maybe that's some statistics of people that don't know Christ, maybe some demographics, and then you also will present the solution. Here's how the church plant is going to kind of fix that problem. Page 4, you can give again some vision, some demographics, and then your final page, page 6 and 7, that's going to have your family picture on it, and then also some of the financial pieces of it, and that's where you'll do your actual ask. And then on the back page, you can just kind of put your contact info there. Now, some of you are thinking, why don't I just mail this booklet to them right away in the beginning so they can look at it before I get there? No, that's not what you want. Remember, you want that face-to-face appointment. So here's just a couple examples. I'll just kind of scroll through these. This is an example of a front. It gives the skyline there, gives a little bit of a visual. Here's some of that, creating the problem. Why does there need to be a church plant? Why specifically in this area? Maybe a little bit of some of the demographics, some of the people that you're trying to reach. Here's one from Knoxville. I'm a big fan of maps, and you'll find out that they're helpful because you're going to be talking to people from all over the place, not just where you are now. And to be able to have a map and to kind of point to that is often something that's helpful as you're raising financial support. You can put your values on there as well. And then that last page, as I said, that if you're thinking of these being folded open on one side, put a big picture of the family on there, because ultimately what you're doing is you're asking for people to financially support you, which this goes back to the attitudes and assumptions things. People often think, well, it'll be easier if I don't ask for money myself. Instead, I'm asking for it for the church. I'm asking it for musical equipment. I'm asking it for rent and that type of thing. What you're going to find is that people want to support you. They don't want to support the operational budget. They don't want to support a speaker system. They want to support you. So you're reinforcing that by showing who are they supporting. I mean, they're supporting your entire family. They're essentially even buying your time to free you up so that you can be a minister of the gospel. So here's an example here, and really key to this is showing what the possible partnerships are. And so you kind of see this kind of broken out into, these monthly gifts, for having one person that's willing to give $1,000 a month, or to have, a couple people that are giving 500, and you have a whole bunch of people that are giving 50 and 25 or 75. You don't have to hit these numbers exactly. The main purpose of putting this is that when they look down, they're going to see where they fit into this picture. Rarely will you ever get exactly, the number of people that you kind of put in each category, but it helps them to see how they are a part of this. Because remember, before we were like, I don't know any rich people. There's also people who are like, well, I couldn't really support them. I could only support them $20 a month, and that's not really enough, so I'll just say no altogether. No, that's exactly kind of what you're expecting. So here's another one. There's just different ways that you can kind of show that and represent that, but just give them something that they can see for that. So just like the phone, you'll go through your presentation, and like I said, pictures are worth 1,000 words. Don't have to be super wordy on things, but you're just kind of painting a picture of what you're going to be doing and why you're inviting them to be part of it. And then you'll get to that last page and you will say something along the lines, would you be willing to support me financially? Would you be able to support me monthly? And just like with that phone call, let them answer the question. Sometimes there's a moment of silence that feels like about 5 minutes has transpired and gone by, and you're just like, oh my goodness, this is so awkward. And you're thinking that they're sitting there judging you, because that's just kind of what our minds and hearts often do, where they might just literally be thinking in their mind, okay, you know what, I could probably like cancel that, cable subscription that I don't even use anymore, or, oh, this is really good. How much can I give towards this? So it's okay for there to be a little bit of silence. And they may even say, are you asking like right now? And you could be, yeah, I want to know if you're interested in being part of that. So you can re-ask the question. And some may say, hey, I just need a little bit more time, or we'd like to discuss it. Totally great. Remember, this is, again, you cast the vision, you're inviting them to come along, and then you're really leaving it in their hands for them to pray about and to kind of make that decision. Some people will right there say, yep, that's me. We're on board for $50 a month. For my story, my highest giver was $400 a month, and all of my other financial support was between $25 and $50 a month. It's just, I had a couple $100s a month, but most were just made up of, those smaller monthly commitments. And we have generally said, ask for 3 to 4 years, because that's usually a lot of times how long it takes to be kind of self-sustaining. So you're asking for that 3 to 4 year period. Okay, so now, with that system, start with prayer, letter, phone call, meeting, and then you sit down and actually make that ask with them, invite them to be part of it. Now you're just going to do that cycle kind of over and over. And so you'll see this graphic here. It just kind of helps a little bit to kind of see, okay, so you went through your first 30, and just so you know, it takes so long. You'll call someone, they'll call back. Then maybe you follow up with a text, then maybe you do something through social media. Just try to avoid some of the easily passive ones first, and there's a little bit of finesse, a little bit of art to that, of how you're following up with people and leaving voicemails and all those different things. But eventually you get those, and then there's going to be people that say no, and that's okay, because you've been faithful and obedient. That person said no, and then you can send out another batch of 10 letters or so. So as you'll see here, this is how we get to this $300,000. So, which makes it so much more doable, because it's really finding 76 different financial partners. And on this, that's only one person who's giving $1,000 a month and one person that's giving $500 a month. You'll see that a majority of them are in that $150, $25 type of thing. And if you're asking for that, that's $600 or $6,275 per month over 4 years, gets that $301,200. So this, of course, is just an example. It's going to differ from person to person, but just giving you kind of a general idea, and you will work this system over and over. Again, this is very, very, very much, Cliff Notes version. So what's the expected effort? When I said, being faithful and obedient to this, this is usually kind of just how it breaks down. 900 phone calls will produce 300 appointments. 300 appointments will produce 100 supporters. 100 supporters at, $62.75 per month, times 48 months, that's how you get there. So it is a lot of work. There is no doubt that raising financial support is a very, very difficult task. But I want to tell you, it's not just a necessary evil. I believe that God uses it to shape our hearts, to change us, to make us dependent upon Him, to be in prayer. And I've had church planners saying, maybe you're even saying this right now, man, this seems so difficult. I can't wait until raising support is over. The bad news that I have for you is it's never over. It changes, but if God's called you into ministry, you are constantly using and stewarding resources. Maybe it's going to be passing a plate, maybe it's doing capital campaigns, but you're always going to, have resource needs that you're going to do. So the biggest thing that I can say is that you be faithful and obedient to casting the vision, inviting people to be part of that, but ultimately you're leaving it up to Him. Now, this is the same concept, the same really framework perspective that we have with evangelism and church planting and ministry in general. We can't force things. We can just be faithful and obedient to our part, and we're trusting God to be the one that ultimately provides. So I hope this has been just a quick little snapshot for you. Like I said, read the God Asked. You're going to get so much more of just those practical things. And we'll probably have some more training and some different things that we can have that will maybe even get into more of the specifics of how you do this and some certain things that you don't. As I already said, do not do the GoFundMe. Don't try to have a golf outing and try all these different creative ways. At the end of the day, it's asking people, inviting them to support you monthly for a 3 to 4 year period. Thank you so much.